the organization to which I belong, and I would rather say a pan-India young face of organization, Shri Muralidhar Rao ji, who's been an asset to us all these years in whatever responsibility he was in. And he has been a source of inspiration to a whole lot of young generation. Mrs. Aruna, who is expected to represent the bureaucracy over here, but has laid out a good keynote job. Mr. Chandrasekhar ji, the august audience over here, members from different streams of society, ladies and gentlemen. I actually got to know of it only this morning that I had to speak over here. So I was reading the topic. So the first thought that occurred to me, of course, at the outset, I have to first thank Bharat Niti for having given me this opportunity and privilege to be here this morning for one of your important programs. And I'm sure when I go back from here, I shall go back wiser than before. Having said that, when I was reading the topic of this morning's conclave and the two-day workshop, what occurred to me was that maybe this was some sort of a misnomer, because media was always meant to be social. Even in the times when we had just half a dozen newspapers in the country. So that too was social media. Maybe now that it's become more integral part, or shall I call it socializing media? Now these small gadgets, small tweets, you speak to each other. Even when you're sitting in front of each other, you wish to talk through this gadget. So it's more of a socializing media rather than social media, because we would be denying due place to the founding fathers of the print media and the founding fathers of the information media the world over and even in this country, if we make this an exclusive debate or an exclusive domain only of the Twitter holders or Facebook account holders. I'm sure many of you sitting over here, the younger lot, may be more social than me, so I had hardly to say anything by way of sermonizing. You may also be more media savvy than me. So more social than me, more media savvy than me. That does not mean that I am unsocial, and certainly not I'm not antisocial. That also does not mean that I am anti-media. Maybe as Shri Muralidhar Rao ji was saying, I am cautious of media, and maybe I am also media shy. कि तुझसे नाराज नहीं जिंदगी हैरान हूँ. So sometimes the way this is evolving amuses me. So that might be the difference between the next generation lot over here and me and others of my generation. The second thought which occurred to me, because as a force of habit we tend to always offer something different wherever we have the opportunity to discuss or talk. We are talking of social media and governance. Now, it is my considered view that per se, social media is going to survive, sustain, thrive, whether or not governance occurs or not. Even if you have an anarchic state and no government, the social media will still survive. And so also governance. Governance is going to stay. But now, since social media is the in thing, so looking from that point of view, I think to put it more appropriately and precisely would be to say that, look here, social media is going to stay. Or social media, as we say in English, is there to stay, whether you like it or not. Governance or no governance, or any other organ or no organ. And therefore, the actual debate is not whether to have social media or not, or whether to connect it with governance or not. But the actual point of introspection would be how best to utilize social media to supplement good governance. A, and B, how best could we adapt to this transition into social media without suffering its side effects, and at the same time taking optimum advantage, a beautiful word produced by Englishmen, optimum, na zyada na kam, zyada ho to hajma kharab, kam ho to kabaz. So the actual, I think, subject of the 2 days introspection would be A, how best social media can supplement good governance, because both are independent entities and both have there to stay. So without contradicting each other, how best they can supplement. And B, how best can we, both those like me who are part of the government, others also, because government is of course by the people and therefore it's nobody's exclusive prerogative, it's everybody's government. How best can we adapt to social media? When Aruna was trying to present the keynote, she referred to Churchill and said we have proved Churchill's words wrong. That's what she meant, rightly so. Because, of course, Churchill had said that if you give independence to India, it will go back by 50 years. And incidentally, by that time, it was Clement Attlee who was the Prime Minister and he was leader of opposition, Churchill. And not only we proved Churchill wrong, host of other thinkers of that time. George Orwell, for example, wrote a book called 1984, where he foretold that the entire world would go red, communist, and India would be there. And by the time 1984 arrived, the Soviet Union itself had collapsed. But having said that, what I'm trying to say is that 66 years is too small a period to judge a nation, regardless of what Churchill said or not. I'm not endorsing or even negating. For a man mortal like me, 50, 60 years appears to be a very, large span. Because when you are approaching 50 and you're approaching 60, आपको एकदम याद आता है, वो भी रह गया, वो भी रह गया, ये होता तो ये करते, ये होता तो ये करते, and then you start thinking, अरे, दुनिया में कुछ नहीं हुआ. Because you think it's the end of the world, because in your subconscious mind starts knocking at your door. Okay, look here, now your end is also approaching. You may not be accepting it, you may not be actually visibly getting conscious of it, but you know you're around. How much is it? At the time of independence, the average lifespan of an Indian was just about 50 years. Now it is what, 65, 66? Some of you who have the privilege of joining the morning health clubs may live up to 80, 85. So that fear starts lurking. But in the life of a nation, 66 years is just infancy. It's a toddler's age. घुटनों के बल चलने वाली आयु. Because the age of a nation is measured in centuries. And therefore, even in the 66 years, we have, even though made a tremendous stride, we are still in a stage of evolution, to put it briefly. We are evolving at different spheres. We are evolving even in relation to our use of media, in relation to our understanding of media, and also in relation to our understanding of governance and our expectations from governance. And that is also evident from the fact that till a few months or a few years ago, the word governance was not much in use. Governance has existed for centuries. And even the first government, the interim government, which was formed just before independence, in which incidentally our founding father Shyama Prasad Mukherjee also happened to be industry minister, was also formed for a governance. But the governance world became fashionable now because we have started understanding the essence of governance now. So this word which was there in dictionary has now suddenly become rediscovered. That is, the level of consciousness has evolved to a higher level. And therefore, social media, I would say, is a tool. Governance is there. And the more our understanding evolves about governance, and the more our understanding evolves, our quest, or jigyasa जिसे आप कहते हैं हिंदी में, about the various instruments or tools which can be used for facilitating the process of better and better governance, then we would realize कि हाँ ये करते तो ज़्यादा अच्छा होता. ट्विटर पर हम अगर समाचार दे दें इस घोषणा का तो ज़्यादा अच्छा है. And in our department of DOPT also, which is with me, nowadays many of the orders for the officers which are passed reach the concerned officer through our website. So the more we hold ourselves responsible, as Mr. Muralidhar was saying, the more accountable we become, the more focused we become to provide good governance, the more and more we realize all the host of different mechanisms, options, tools, including social media, which are available to us to provide better governance. Ever since the present government took over on the 26th of May 2014, the Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi gave us the mantra of maximum governance, minimum government. And then we have the e-governance, then we have the digitalization, and a host of other things which follow as a sequel. Now, and this citizen-centric governance. Incidentally, simultaneously at this time, there is another workshop going on citizen-centric governance, which also I had the opportunity to inaugurate. I think today is the concluding day. So when we go on to make the optimum use of the social media, because now we have to confine this morning and for the next 2 days to these two aspects, otherwise we'll go astray, we'll go talk, we'll go on and on. First, we have to understand what is our objective as far as governance is concerned. Only then you can use the social media, isn't it? See, if you have to convey a piece of information, how best do you do it on a Twitter or a social media will only come when you are able to understand the essence of information. पुराने ज़माने में भी किसी का देहांत हो जाता, स्वर्गवास हो जाता, तो कहते जी तरीके के साथ चिट्ठी लिखिए. आप पत्र में लिख दीजिए कि बहुत ज़्यादा बीमार हैं, हालत गंभीर है. अगले पत्र में लिखेंगे कि स्वर्गवास हो गया. So first you have to understand what actually is this good governance. And to my mind, good governance has to be essentially citizen-centric. Again, I would say, there is no point in holding a session or even discussing that it has to be citizen-centric. If it is not citizen-centric, it has defeated its very purpose. And when the Honorable Prime Minister says, and we also tend to propagate, that it has to be maximum governance, minimum government, which in other words would mean that it should be a governance which is targeting the citizen and which does away with the unnecessary delays, the unnecessary file work, the unnecessary red tapeism, which essentially would be taken care of only if you go over to the electronic methods, including the social media. So you see how naturally a link is established. And then you would ask, what is citizen-centric? I mean, this is also a word which has become very fashionable in the last few months. Citizen-centric, to my mind, is something which we were taught in the organization to which me and Shri Muralidhar Ji Rao belongs. many years ago, before this word began to be used, and was taught by none else by then one of our founding fathers, Pandit Deen Dayal Upadhyay, who said Antoday. तो मुरलीधर जी यही अंत्योदय है सिटीजन सेंट्रिक। और अंत्योदय की अगर आपने लक्ष्य लेकर चलना है तो आपके पास माध्यम क्या है? सुशासन। See how naturally these things fitting in. They were all there. We have started discovering them now. And Antyodaya, when translated in English, as I understand it, would mean last man in the last queue. So the ultimate yardstick of any democratic setup is to test whether or not the benefits of the welfare state, which of course is governance, have reached or not reached the last man in the last queue. If they have not, that means you have still lagged behind in achieving the ultimate objective. And then the question arises that if you have to achieve so, naturally you have to make use of all these tools available to us, which include the social media. And then you talk of digitalization, which has also been discussed about in the last 12-15 months, ever since this government took over, because the government under the leadership of Prime Minister Modi had the vision to realize that these were some of the essential tools which should be put to optimum, maximum use to carry forward this objective of last man, last queue. And therefore, the sooner we do it, the better we do it. And therefore, the emphasis on digitalization. Therefore, a public discourse on digitalization. And therefore, this digitalization becomes a subject of debate, even in your television sets, besides, of course, Indrani Mukherjee. We have changed the discourse, what I'm trying to say. This government has changed the discourse by making you realize about the facts, about the mechanisms, about the options which were already existing, but were not being put to the right use. And I think that is the biggest contribution made by Prime Minister Modi. Now, when you talk of digitalization, I always say, digitalization would also happen with or without us, because this is a global phenomenon. It's happening all over the world. It's not that if I don't push it, it will not happen, or if I push it, it will happen in a different way. The only thing is that I am conscious about it. I am trying to push it hard, and the government is trying to push it hard. But as members of the society, which all of us are, you, me, they, all of us, what we have to understand, which sometimes we forget to realize, is that besides the digitalization of the government work or governance, an essential prerequisite is the digitalization of the mindset. And notwithstanding 250 million internet users and so many million using the Facebook, etc. And when I say digitalization of mindset, I'll explain to you, because you will think he's simply juggling with words. Because we have lived through so many years of a different kind of a mindset, which has a cumulative conditioning. And that has to be overcome. Just as they say in English, we have to unlearn some of the things which we learned. Unless we unlearn those things, we will not be able to learn these. And I'll give you a small example, because otherwise it will just go. One of the first things that we did in DOPT, and I was personally very vindicated to do that, was that we did away with the practice of having certificates attested by the gazetted officers. So we started the practice of self-attested certificate. Fortunately, the Prime Minister also encouraged us in that, because it was a revolutionary step. It never happened in the last 60-65 years. But being in opposition and being always in the agitational mode, we had the advantage of going through all the hardships that you have to do when you are on the wrong side of government. So we had learned through personal experience. I belong to a village. I came from a village where miles and miles you did not have a gazetted officer. और मुरलीधर जी, जब हमारे यहाँ 10वीं कक्षा में बालक पहुँचता तो कहते कि आप अटेस्टेड कराओ सर्टिफिकेट, तो हम ये होते कि ये प्राणी कैसा होगा गैजेटेड ऑफिसर, कैसा दिखता होगा, कि कान 2 ही होंगे कि 4 होंगे। बोले गैजेटेड ऑफिसर ये होता है एक गैजेटेड, उसके बाद मोहर होती है, वो लगवानी है आपको। और किलोमीटर, कई मीलों को दूर तक हमारे गांव से एक तहसीलदार साहब होते थे, उसकी तलाश में निकलते थे। एंड वंस व्हेन आई वाज इन क्लास 11 आई हैड टू स्पेंड ₹5 फॉर एन अटेस्टेशन, when I didn't have that kind of money because the kind of background I came from, and somebody else paid for that. So we had this, we had the personal experience of what the youth was. And when we introduced it, I said it is not only for the sake of convenience and for sake of ease of governance, which of course has happened. A state has reported that earlier on they were spending much more on all these niceties. The expenditure has come down. But more than that, and more importantly, we were able to convey a very important message to the youth of this country that look here, this government has the capacity to trust its youth. And then somebody asked me one day, and that connects with what Muralidhar ji was saying, that now we have large majority who are going to be youth. And when we made this announcement, a friend from one of the friends from the media asked, what if somebody forges his certificate and then creates a mess? So I said, just as we have the capacity to trust the youth of this country, we also have the capacity to trust the ability of the youth of this country. आपके बच्चे हैं, ये हमारे बच्चे हैं, कहीं आपकी तरबियत, आपके प्रशिक्षण में कमी रह गई होगी कि उनको इतनी भी समझ नहीं है कि यदि ऐसा करेंगे तो उसके परिणाम क्या होंगे. So I am sure the youth today know the consequences of doing otherwise. But why I raked up this now is connecting with the, you remember a few moments ago I said digitalization of mindset. So like a good teacher, I have not forgotten that. I've been a teacher for a quarter of a century. So what I was saying, ये digitalization का क्या हुआ? We passed this order about 1 year ago, but still many states did not follow it. So I started, because I am traveling very often to different states, different districts, blocks. My own constituency is a very heterogeneous constituency. So I started meeting collectors individually and started telling them, please hold awareness camps. Also got help of our own organization, our student wing, Akhil Bharatiya Vidyarthi Parishad, started holding camps, even in Northeast, which is प्रेजेंटली पार्ट ऑफ माई रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी, टू एजुकेट यूथ कि जब आप जाएं आप कहिए कि साहब भारत सरकार ने ये कानून पास कर दिया, आपको ये टेस्टेड की जरूरत नहीं है, ताकि वहाँ जो प्रशासक बैठा हुआ उसके भी ध्यान में ये बात आ जाए, उसकी समझ में. एंड यू नो व्हाट हैपेंड, वी लिव टू लर्न एंड इट्स माई डिक्टम टू ट्राई टू लर्न वन थिंग एवरी डे. एज टुडे आई लर्न दैट though I may not be using social media as much as many of the young friends do, but I am not anti-social. So similarly, what I learned just a week back, a collector in one of my constituencies, who is a brilliant IAS officer, who was even given the Civil Services Award this year, he told me कि सर हमने वो आपका वो जो dictum था वो अपनाया जरूर, awareness camp, but there is a different kind of problem now that has arisen. जो नौजवान आते हैं वो इंसिस्ट करते हैं कि नहीं हमारा टेस्टेड किया हुआ लो. So, Madam Aruna, what is the answer to that? Who is responsible? I mean, that is the collector saying. One of from your fraternity says, now tell me, doctor, you told me, give awareness, I've given awareness, I've broken my head against the wall, but these youth say, no. We will submit certificates attested by God. From what? So can anybody of you answer why it's so? Now, if you have an answer, I would like to know. So I told him, now the medical scientist has to come into play. And I said, I have an answer. I said, you don't have to scold these youngsters. You don't have to blame them. You don't have to quarrel with them. You don't have to accuse with them. You have to sympathize with them. Because this young man coming from a remote and a resourceless background is speaking this out of a cumulative mindset of several years. इसको लगता होगा कि साहब ये डीसी साहब को तो मंत्री ने बोल ही दिया किसको लगाना है नौकरी पे, और मुझे ठग रहा है कि सर्टिफिकेट ना लगा बेटे ऐसे ही आ जाएगा. Because we have developed that cynicism, madam. The citizen does not believe Aruna. Aruna doesn't believe the minister. So that trust deficit, and it's not that there's something wrong with her, or something wrong with me, or something wrong with the common citizen. It's a kind of a cynicism which has developed, unfortunately, very unfortunately, over the last few years, particularly in the last 2 decades, because of the misgovernance, or I would say malgovernance, not misgovernance, malgovernance, and the malpractice of the people at the helm. And therefore, a common Indian, an average Indian, the more have-not he is, the lower the strata from which he belongs, is more cynic about you. वो सोचता है एक नया हथकंडा शुरू किया आज डीसी ने, पैसे खा गया होगा 2 कैंडिडेटों से, हमको कहता है पैसे जमा ही मत कराओ. So that is what I am saying. We have to overcome this years of malaise to induce this kind of digitalization. As far as now, in the last few minutes, I also have to do some ministerial talk, because that is how I was given the opportunity to be the chief guest. Otherwise, I entitled to be a faculty member, which I have been all these years. But this distinction, thanks to the organizers of Bharat Niti. And therefore, as a minister, I would say that what matters behind all this is the men behind the governance. And in a welfare state India, essentially, the people who are manning the government will make the ultimate difference. However much the accountability, however awakened the social media, however aggressive the other bodies of accountability, if the men behind the government lack sincerity, lack honesty, and lack commitment, things will not go in right direction. That is why it has led to cynicism. And why I am saying so is that fortunately, at least of today, I can say this with all the confidence that we have at the helm, under the leadership of Mr. Modi, we have people at the helm who have the honesty, who have the will, who have the commitment. And there is a Prime Minister who encourages you to experiment, to innovate, to juggle with ideas, appreciates that. He is not a status quoist. He would appreciate if you come forward with something new, and would rather, many a time people ask me, how is the experience of working with Prime Minister Modi? So I said, I would not say that he is an inspiration, rather I would say he is a great resource person. You can go and discuss space with him and he'll have something new, because he would have observed it during one of his tours. He has a natural temper for creativity. And that is why, when I was asked to give my reaction on the 26th of May when we were sworn in, I said in a single sentence, I would say it is a sunrise at sunset. It has happened in the evening hours and the whole world is watching. And when the evening is approaching, there is the advent of a journey from pessimism to optimism. The entire nation, and that pessimism, that cynicism, that sense of helplessness had led us to a situation where we were unable to make use of these tools available to us, whether it was social media. Social media तो मोदी के आने से पहले भी था ना, हमारे आने से पहले भी था. But that consciousness, like when Alexander Fleming was given a Nobel Prize, I think I'll have to stop in 2-3 minutes because otherwise I'll go on and on. Alexander Fleming got Nobel Prize for penicillin discovery, which was called the Queen of Drugs during the Second World War. And the common accusation against him was that he should not have been given a Nobel Prize because it was an incidental discovery. Okay, there was a disk of bacteria, he saw them clearing away with the penicillin, and he said, okay, now this is an antibiotic. So you know what Alexander Fleming said? He said, even if I concede that it is an incidental degree, I do deserve credit for having discovered this incident happening. So social media existed before. All these tools existed before. But Mr. Modi, and under his inspiration, the government has succeeded in putting it in public discourse for the utility of governance. It is, though it will not be strictly related to the topic today, but you would appreciate what a huge, huge new mass programs initiated by this government which could not have been imagined of, visualized for several decades. Jan Dhan Yojana. You don't have a penny in your pocket and still you can have a bank account. Could you ever think of this in this country? You carry with you pocket full of money and even then the bank makes you go round and round. Wahan se verification, wahan se no clearance, otherwise finally you think better not to have an account. Here banker goes to your house and without asking you for money, you can open an account. And when this happened, I wrote a small piece. I said, more than an economic reform, it is also a reiteration of the self-esteem of an average poor Indian. He has the pride to say, now, look here, I don't have money in my pocket, but I have a bank account. I have an ATM card, like Muralidhar Rao ji has in his front pocket, though the money may be different. That is, you have given him, the person who had never been to the inside of a bank, you gave him the esteem of being shoulder to shoulder with you. And that these pension yojana, you deposit certain amount after the age of 18, and after that, these are all happening through the use of the social media, internet. And their propagation also making the best use of social media. Could you ever think that after the age of 60, whether you have worked earlier in your life or not, whether you have been in service or not, you would still be entitled to have a pension? I wrote in a small sentence on the social media, I said, this is the first step from non-pension society to a pension society, where कोई नौजवान है, कोई बेरोजगार है, कोई गृहिणी है, कोई किसान है, उसको मन में ये विश्वास रहेगा कि 60 वर्ष की आयु के बाद मैं भी पेंशन मिल सकती है. अदरवाइज स्टिल अबाउट 20 years ago, अगर कोई सरकारी नौकरी वाला होता तो आप कुर्सी से हिलना शुरू हो जाते, जनाब गेस्टेड ऑफिसर होता था कि नहीं हमारे समाज में? दिल्ली में तो ज़्यादा होता था, उत्तर भारत में, और हमारे गांव में तो शादी भी नहीं होती थी इफ यू वर नॉट अ गवर्नमेंट सर्वेंट. You would have to be a government in service to have a bride, because he would think कि साहब ये कल रहे ना रहे, कम से कम बेटी को तो family pension मिल जाएगी. So what a revolutionary breakthrough this is. And when this was launched, I said, this has given economic security after 60, but social security from 40. And you ask me how? You have the answer. All of us in that age group. All your children away. बड़े गर्व के साथ कहते हैं, बेटी मेरी वो न्यूयॉर्क के पास आगे एक फलां बैंक है, उसकी वाइस प्रेसिडेंट बन गई. बेटा मेरा सऊदी अरेबिया में फलां है, उसका ही बन गया. But in heart of hearts, that is just to overcome the sense of emptiness within, because you know the kind of traffic that you have in Delhi. कहीं यहाँ से NDMC से बाहर निकलते ही कुछ आगे पीछे गड़बड़ हो गई तो वो तो 10वें या 13वें दिन तक ही पहुँचेगा वाइस प्रेसिडेंट और CEO. पड़ोसी ध्यान रखेंगे. So that kind of mental insecurity begins even at your middle age of 45, 50, when your children, because you can't hold back the progress of your progeny. He has to travel out to discover the new vistas of world, and you feel insecure within, and to overcome that, you keep telling my son, vice president, my daughter, some other president. This is remarkable. This is the actual contribution of this government, and it has happened because of social media. To just sum it up, I would just say that, as I said in the beginning, social media is something that had to happen, and it's a global phenomenon, it's a spontaneous phenomenon, and I said the point is not whether it happens or not, the point is how best we can make it happen. A small example, when we started the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, it was Prime Minister's suggestion, put it on the media to invite a good logo. And a logo was sent by a boy, the glasses of Mahatma Gandhi, one written on Swachh and one written on Abhiyan. So it is I would say, a streamlined, constructive involvement of the society under Prime Minister Modi to be a part of the governance, because otherwise, like a young boy can go astray also, the social media can take you also astray. So it has streamlined our entire society in a more constructive task of nation building, not only made them a part of nation building, but also given them a constructive direction. And this is not to say that this has happened now. Every generation has its share of transition. I remember I was in the institute in 90s, late 90s, when this mobile came. So in Delhi also, it was a big, huge instrument, and the first news that was made, I don't know whether around, I think 2000, there was an accident in beyond Noida. The greater Noida is yet to come up, and a boy who had a mobile could ring up from his trapped car to his parents. So he was picked up, taken to the hospital, given blood transfusion, he saved. That made a big news in Delhi. See, what are the merits of having a mobile? So that's why mobile revolutionized what happened earlier. This is revolutionizing what already existed. So only thing is that when we look at it, we say, this is because it has come in my time, so this is bigger than the earlier. But this is again, as I said, a time of evolution. But one thing I can say with confidence, when the history of this country is written, just as you know, when the history of the world is written, you divide eras. As I said, 66 years is very small. You have pre-war era, for example, you have post-war. Pre-war means before Second World War, kya hua? Post-war means, isi tarah se you have pre-independence, you have post-independence. And therefore, the very fact that Bharat Niti thinks it appropriate to have a discussion on governance and social media is itself a tribute to a cue given by Prime Minister Modi. And therefore, the history may also record the eras, pre-Modi era and post-Modi era. And therefore, all the best to you, particularly the youngsters over here. I think we are all privileged to be a part of all this new happening over here, but you have an added privilege because you are going to outlive us, and therefore, you are going to be the makers of tomorrow India. You are the ones who will realize the dream of Make in India. And when India becomes a global power, as it is destined to in the next few years, you will have the privilege and pride, which many of us may not have, to look back or to tell your children, look here, we have also contributed in adding this historic chapter in making India global. Thank you.